Hi all, I'm here with Sebastian, and it's a follow-up on his DEB presentation. And Sebastian, thank you for your time. And we will move right to the first question. So, can you please explain your findings to an undergrad student from unrelated field?
Yefim, thanks for having me. Um, Going back to the talk I gave a couple of weeks ago, I mean, I would start with an easy example of these preference inconsistencies that we study. So one of the cornerstones of rational decision making is some type of consistency. So we think about that you have a preference that guides your behavior in different scenarios. I mean, not perfectly, but at least to some extent, right? So, and the more concrete example, if you prefer apple over oranges, and then I ask you, what do you want, an apple or an orange? I would expect you to take the apple. And at the same time, if I ask you, how much would you be willing to pay to get this apple or to get this orange, I would expect that you be willing to pay a little bit more for the apple. So that would be what we mean by consistency in your preference here. And in this project that I presented, we showed that this type of consistency is not always met. And in particular, we did this not with apples and oranges, but with more abstract lotteries under risk. So these are basically boxes with balls, and each ball contains one outcome. And participants in our study could decide which of the boxes they want to get one independent random draw from this. And then the number in this ball, so to say, would determine the bonus payment that the participants can get. And for the participants to learn about what they can expect in these balls, they had the chance to get independent draws from it before they make a decision. And they can just see what can they expect to be in these different urns. And now we had exactly this two different modes of presenting basically a very similar question. So first of all, we gave them two different balls, gave them these individual draws, and then asked them which they want to play for a potential bonus. And there they chose the option that was more risky, so basically had a higher variance. So there's a higher likelihood of get some very high outcomes, but also sometimes very, very low outcomes. So they express some type of risk loving or risk seekingness. But then if we ask them to independently evaluate their willingness to pay for each of these boxes, they were willing to pay more for the boxes with the low variance, low risk. So this is this basic inconsistency I was talking about. And then we wanted to find an explanation of this. And for us, the explanation is not so much in people changing their risk preferences all of a sudden, but we think this is because of the cognitive processes that underlie information processing, representation, and integration. And basically, we have two parts of a theory that can explain both things at the same time. The one is very old, since Fechner, but also Bernoulli, is this idea that numeric information is represented in our brains in a compressed mental number line. And this makes sense because it basically helps you to encode information in a very vast range with a limited number of coding blocks, so to say. And if this is the case, then you automatically undervalue high variance options more than low variance options because you compress the high outcomes more than the moderate or lower outcomes. But then in the case of these choices where you see the random draws from two options at the same time, here there's another mechanism at work, and that's basically a competition for attention. So if you see more than one outcome information, there's competition in how much you pay attention to each of them. And here, especially in the theory of selective integration, we assume that participants pay more attention to the high outcomes because maybe they're more salient or they are easier to process. And if you write this down mathematically, then you will find that people have a preference, or that higher valuation is given to high variance options. So this can explain basically a compression in the individual valuations, which is then overridden by this competition of attention if you do a choice task where you choose between two options. And yeah, just to conclude, our idea is that these preference reversals can occur because people use different cognitive processes to make use of information that is presented in different ways. And thus it's very important to take care of the informational structure and then the cognitive processes that help you to process, represent, and integrate information to predict behavior across different contexts.
Thank you. That's very interesting. So a methodological question, you basically use a sampling paradigm, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or a repeated sampling paradigm?
Yeah, sampling.
Sampling. A one shot or a repeated one?
So they had one shot. So they saw 20 samples, no,
Mm-hmm.
like 12 samples, I think, in this experiments mostly. And then they made one consequential choice. Yeah.
I see. Have you been surprised by the risk seeking? Because it contradicts a lot of previous literature.
To some extent, I'm still surprised by it. To another extent, one of the co-authors is Konstantinos Tsetsos on this paper, and he found this already 2012. So basically, this was part of the collaboration that we had. So he had this finding of risk seeking, and at the same time, I had a previous publication with colleagues where we find this risk aversion in independent valuations and decisions from experience. And that's why we thought, okay, that's an interesting contradiction here. Let's join forces and try to figure out how this can be explained. Yeah.
I see. Very interesting. And tell me, please, how do you plan or think your results can be extended?
Yeah, so most generally, I could advertise a bit. There's a perspectives article that some other set of colleagues and me wrote. It's called The Future of Decisions from Experience, connecting real-world decision problems to cognitive processes. And in a way, I think there we try to outline a bit what we think would be interesting questions for the future. And some things are already mentioned here. Yeah, what I think is the most interesting part is to, on the one hand, to increase the variety or the complexity of the decision from experience experimental paradigm, to incorporate more real-world situations. So for example, that usually we have information from multiple sources and we have to weight it somehow, or that information is presented to us delayed or not very reliably, or come from different social sources that have their own agendas and so on. So I think there are many interesting parts in which we can make the decision from experience paradigm more suitable to modern day decision making that has many pitfalls, I think. And on the other hand, yeah, we think that the cognitive processes in how we integrate this information and decision from experience, that might be the invariant. That is the thing that hopefully is more or less stable over context. And in contrast, I think just behavior, just looking at choice proportions or these type of things, we cannot very reliably predict this across different contexts. So I think that is not interesting to just characterize the behavior, but rather to have a paradigm where we can find and show cognitive processes that lead then to certain behaviors. And these cognitive processes, like we have examples in this paper, for example, memory processes, right? Especially if there's delayed presentation of information, how do different layers of memory processes affect what we recall and then what we also value from different options. But then also what we discussed before, attentional competition, if there are several sources of information. But then also learning mechanisms, where you and your group also did a lot of work on, like if you have mental models in your mind of how certain stochastic processes can work, then might be very interesting. Then you will interpret information you consume much more differently than, if you have a different mental model. So I think looking at these cognitive processes and model these with computational modeling would be a nice extension of this work, and also to help to predict across different research contexts, but also in the real world, then hopefully, yeah.
Sounds like a big project.
Yeah, this is like the bigger theme I have in mind, and now I try to fill different parts of it, right? So this one is now about attention competition. I have one other about memory processes, or the other one was about learning. So I think the empirical project in itself can still be contained to be feasible, but the overarching aim, hopefully structures it a bit.
Yeah, so look forward to see the results of your project. So
Let you
good
know.
luck with that.
Thanks.
Um, Moving forward from your research to more general questions, what is, in your opinion, the most pressing issue nowadays in the social science?
Yeah, I guess there are many. I mean, what bothers me the most, and that also relates a bit to what I said before, I think is external validity of our results. So across experiments, this is one thing, especially when we work with risk preferences. I think we all are boggled by it in one way or another. So we don't have a clear way of measure, or like a clear standard of how we measure our constructs in the social or behavioral sciences very often, right? So if you take risk taking, there's so many different paradigms. There are questionnaires, so I can just ask you, how much do you like to take risks? Or there are all these behavioral tasks. There's a Kahneman-Tversky lottery type descriptive task. Then we talked a lot of decision from experience. It's a different presentation format. There are much more different experimental tasks. And to some extent, we know from Renato Frey's work and also others that these behaviors do not correlate much amongst one another. And I think this is problematic, because if you ask me what is risk, I cannot give a clear answer, and I cannot tell you what to expect a person does when I see behavior in one situation and then transfer it to another. So I think that's really uh, bothersome, and I hope we as a field can move forward on that. And then the final goal, of course, would be to also predict in the real world, right? And I think there we also have a problem that many of our paradigms, we are not sure how good they predict in important real world decisions that maybe policymakers or investment companies would be interested in. And there's little research who does this, and research who does it usually finds small correlations. So I think that's a big challenge.
I completely agree with you. I think it's also a problem of definition. Like different
Mhm.
people define risk very differently, or many other things like different. It's not only a problem, we not always agree on what is risk, for example.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, I agree with you. This is a challenging issue. Another related question: what is your vision for our community from, let's say, 10 years from now?
Yeah, I think for one, I think we have so many experimental paradigms that some agreement or some more consolidation would be helpful. I feel sometimes that we have this zoo of empirical findings, and everyone has their own favorite findings, and we do not know, do these findings again have external validity? So if I have my own pet experimental paradigm and you have yours, the finding I have here, would that relate or would that correspond to findings in your paradigm as well, or would it not? So that's definitely very important to more quickly, if new findings, so to speak, arise, that we more quickly come to an agreement. Is this an important finding? Does it have some robustness and some external validity, or is it maybe a particularity of one particular experiment? Because I think sometimes, these different groups and findings and experimental paradigms live side by side without any agreement and without even
Interaction.
interaction. Yeah, so this is one thing. And the other thing, I mean, related to this also, of course, theories. It's very similar. Think many people have their own theory, and there's little work trying to integrate different theories. And I know, of course, you have been part of some of the projects of, for example, prediction tournaments, which is one way, I think, to force everyone to make some theory alignment. Other ideas maybe are now with AI and machine learning tools that can maybe replicate and extend the extent of computational models that are available, and also model ontologies, so that you maybe go a step further again or step away again and look what are the interesting theoretical mechanisms before we use specific mathematical functional forms to test them, right? So these are things that maybe the new technology can help with that.
I completely agree with you. I think since you mentioned me, so we try to focus to solve this issue, focusing on predictions instead of trying to, because different people often even um, name one thing with different theories, completely different. Sometimes people even are not aware one of another, and so we try to focus on the prediction. But I completely agree with uh, what you are saying. Um, Moving from the general questions to more maybe personal ones, how do you manage to find a work-life balance, if at all? And a related question, how many hours a day or a week are you working? I'm just curious to know.
Yeah, so good question. I mean, I think one of the reasons why I'm in academia is that I don't have to keep track of this. So I really don't distinguish my life. I think like the classical worker life is they know exactly when they are working and when they are, have free time. And for us, I feel for most of them, it's a bit blurry, right? Sometimes we sit in the evening at the dinner and have an interesting idea and have to write this down. And yeah, sometimes we maybe sit in the office and just have a talk about something completely unrelated. So I think it's really hard to pinpoint it down, but that's already, for me, I think at least part of the secret why I don't feel that I need a better work-life balance, so to say. But if I really had to write it down, I would say maybe yeah, 9 hours maybe per work day and 3 to 4 hours usually in the morning on the weekends. So something like that. I would try to work. So I think it's more than the standard office job. But yeah, as I said, because mostly I can do what I like, it doesn't feel very yeah, it doesn't feel so bad, so to say. And I have to say, I'm still a postdoc, right? So my teaching load is relatively low. I just have 3 seminars a year. Yeah, and a bit of supervision work. So there's still enough time to do the research I like, and the teaching is also mostly pleasant. So yeah, I'm in a lucky situation, I think. In a professor position, of course, there's more admin work that can be feel more like work that you maybe want to reduce.
Fortunately for you,
Yeah.
you remind me of a friend of mine, Anna Dorfman. She likes to joke. She say it's not her joke, but anyways, she say in academia we are very lucky. We are allowed to choose the 7 days a week we are preferring to work on.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, it's a good joke, and I think there's also some truth to it. At least for me, it feels this self-efficacy or this self, how do you call it? That you have the power to decide yourself how you do it, and I think that is very nice, and that keeps me from feeling too stressed. So that's indeed nice. Yeah.
Cool. Interesting to learn that. And if not academia, you are privileged to be in academia, but if not academia, what would you do? What do you think?
Yeah, so when I started, I mean, I studied economics. So back then, I was interested in financial market regulations and bank supervision. So for some years, I thought I would go to yeah, central bank type of work, doing a bit of macro forecasting or thinking about, yeah, banking regulations. I mean, that was also during the times of the financial crisis, 2008. So that was a very prominent topic. And at my school, there were some leading scholars on this topic. So that was something I was really interested in for some time. Nowadays, I guess if I would have to switch, I would do something data related. I mean, I like the data science revolution, and I think there's so many exciting things happening. So I would try to find some company that pays me to work with data somehow.
So related to the things you are doing now, but now you have even more freedom.
Yeah, exactly.
And speaking about freedom, how do you find or choose your research questions?
Yeah, I think mostly really by reading other papers and trying to identify research gaps. And of course, there are always much more research gaps that you can work on. I think then I try to prioritize research gaps that I think are interesting to distinguish between theories or help to unravel, yeah, cognitive processes, a bit in line what I said at the beginning. So I really have this always in mind that if I think about economic behavior, I think what are important cognitive mechanisms here and how can I reveal them or show that they matter or show that they are more stable across different contexts than the behavior itself. Something like that. But now more and more I also want to get inspired more by everyday problems because I feel this method I used now, I think you can come up with feasible projects, but you're sometimes a bit stuck with the existing experimental paradigms. And what recently bothers me is again, if you think about the external validity, do I study just an experimental paradigm or do I study a choice problem that is of general interest, right? And I feel I want to go more in this direction to study interesting choice problems irrespective of the experimental paradigm, if that makes sense.
Yes, definitely. And it's very nice to learn that you are from the scholars who are not only writing, but also reading papers.
Yeah,
I'm
every
just
now and then,
joking.
yeah. The abstracts, yeah, okay.
Another question, if I'm allowed, I can think of you and me as young scholars, but still, what will be your advice for younger scholars?
Yeah, I would think you should definitely do something that you like and enjoy because I think it's not a career path just for prestige or for money. I think that's not the best choice you could do in academia. I think it's really if you value to work on problems that are meaningful to you and if you like this independence, that is something that really should be on the first, at least for me, that's my motivation, and that's also what keeps me happy. If yeah, you go through periods of rejections or times where you feel you're a bit overwhelmed by all this stuff, yeah, that you still keep the fun of it and still be curious to learn new things. Um, and then one particular thing I can think about now that I supervised a couple of PhD students, especially for PhD students, I think after a year or 1.5 years or so, you should really take responsibility of your projects. I think that's really important because you have to always think about it that for your own project, you are, at least if you worked hard for a year and really try to grasp with or grapple with the topic, then you are really the expert on it, and you be in a position that you can evaluate feedback. Of course, other people with more experience can give you helpful advice, but you should be in a position to evaluate this yourself and take the advice that is useful to you, but then also have the courage to deviate from more experienced scholars' advice if you think that doesn't work for your project. And this also, I think, helps to motivate you, and I think also helps you to prepare for academic career.
Wow, interesting. Kind of a scary advice, scary in the sense that you say you have to take responsibility, be the owner of the project and be the expert, be the one who knows the most on this
Yeah, I mean, I
issue.
think we agree that you have to do it at one point. I think the question is, what is the sweet spot? When should you do it? And I feel maybe PhD students should do it earlier than what I experienced, but yeah, that's of course also individual and depends on the.
Definitely. I think it also depends on the advisor because some gives more freedom and the other gives you less freedom as the advisee, I
Yeah,
assume.
yeah, that's true.
Excellent advices. So we are approaching the end of our interview. Perhaps my last question for you. which book would you recommend us to read?
Yeah, so I have to admit, I haven't read many books in the last years.
This
I
is
don't
because you read articles.
Yeah, I'm basically focused on articles like, I don't know, TICS papers or perspectives or annual review articles. I think these are nowadays often more up to date or more specific to what you're looking for than books. But if I had to name one book that I discovered the last years that I look into is Richard McElreath's Statistical Rethinking. So that's a book about Bayesian statistics, but also for me, I think it's a much more just about statistical thinking in general. And what I really like about it is that he has a very nice style of writing, very intuitively about complicated problems, and also use a lot of simulations. So because yeah, I'm not a trained mathematician, and I always struggle a bit with pure math, I have to say. And yeah, he does it really well for me in the sense of, yeah, simulating everything out. You can look at the code, you can do it yourself, you can play around with it. And that's, I think it's a very nice way of thinking about problems for beginners who start with a PhD, but I think also later in your career, as I am now, when I want to revisit some of the problems that I forgot about, or want to encounter a new problem and want to hear what they say about it.
Nowadays, you can also ask the AI to help you with the math, or you don't trust them.
True. Yeah, I think it's not so much that I don't, I want to see the proof or so, but just like the pure mathematical proofs are not very intuitive for me. I mean, I can read them and I can understand it. And in my econometric class, that's what we did, but it didn't stick to me over years. So for me, I think I more completely grasp it if I do the simulations myself and see the results simulated out. But yeah.
I see. Dear Sebastian, thank you so much for your time. And I encourage our listeners, if you have not listened to your excellent talk, to listen to the talk, which will be a link available in the seminar, in the interview. And I want to thank you again.
Thanks, Yefim, for the nice interview.
Thank you.